Hello and welcome back to Marine for TCG. My name is Joe. Drink of the day is Brutal Fruits Ruby Apple Cider. Very nice one, actually. And earlier this week, I asked... Actually, it might have been a few weeks ago now, at the time of publishing this video. But anyway, earlier this month, last month maybe, I asked you, what are you hoping for the future? Because with the ban list update already out by the time this video comes out, block rotation rapidly approaching, and simultaneous release looking like OP16, I'm really excited for what's going to come throughout the next season of the One Piece card game. Being on par with the East in terms of releases is going to be really unique for me as someone who's come from Pokemon, where they're also a little bit behind Japan. So I'm really excited to still be on the forefront of cooking up new decks for the first time, really. But that said, I ask you, what are you hoping for this season? There could be a new card for your favourite character, new type of game mechanic, new type of tournament, or anything else. And I did start it off with, I'd like to see more leaders that have a dilemma of whether their curve is better first or second. For example, in the new set, Lucy, your curve is 4 Don for your Rent into Cavendish, and then 7 Don for Sabo. So you've got the choice of, oh, do I want to go on evens, and then get Cavendish out on turn 2, or do I want to go on odds and get to Sabo 1 Don earlier? So you've got a choice there, right? With decks like Emu and Purple and L, you always want the same curve. Maybe you'll snipe it off your opponent once in a while, but in general, it just feels like those decks always want the same. So if you lose dice, it feels like you already lost half the battle, and you get some ridiculous first versus second win rates in certain matchups, like this one that's on your screen now. And it just kind of, I don't know, it takes a little bit of the fun out of the game for me when it feels like quite so much is decided by dice. Dice is always going to be important, even in like a 50-50 matchup. Dice sort of might swing it to 55-45. But with these decks that always want the same thing, it does just feel a little bit more tiresome to me playing into them when they get their optimal curve. But anyway, that's my opinion, and these are your opinions. First up, Neon Lamp wants more integration of stages into the game. They said, I just want them to feature more stages. More interestingly, Calgara and the Shandians have become mechanics for it, which, yeah, they can bot deck 1-cost stages, which is pretty cool. And they're pretty bad outside of the 5-cost wiper, which is true. But an Emu has the possibility of switching modes by changing stage, but they don't, because one of them is just miles better than the other. And yeah, I think there's definitely some interesting stuff you could do with stages. I kind of like the idea of Emu's ability where they get to play their stage directly from the deck. I think it is interesting, like as an extension of the leader. I think the execution is not particularly interesting, but I think the concept is pretty cool. And definitely having more ways for stages to change gameplay, I think would be cool. Like, what if you had a stage that bottom decked itself after 2 turns or something, but whilst it's on the field for those 2 turns, it gives you a powerful debuff effect, or I don't know, like a Moby Dick style effect where it buffs your characters, but then it does leave, so it's a temporary measure. And maybe 2 turns would be too good. Maybe it would just have to be 1 turn. I don't know. But I think there's definitely some interesting messing around they could do with stages. Or like you could have a stage that's there for 2 turns and it says, I don't know, while this stage is in play, no player can use counter events or something. I don't know, maybe that would be too broken. But that probably would be too broken. But just seeing them mess around with different effects for stages, and I think temporary stages as well, would be interesting. Because if the stages are too good, you get the situation where, kind of like with Emu, where there's just no counterplay because they haven't printed stage removal. Obviously, Lucy has access to it now. I'm well aware of that. He's a really good Emu counter, it seems, as such. But in general, there's very little interaction for stages outside of 1-costs. So I think if they were going to do this, you'd also need to make somewhat generic events. Maybe they'd be 0 costs, but instead of having a trigger, you just give them an effect for, like, it's rest 2 Don and then bottom deck a stage or something. Just as answers that people can put in their deck and not feel bad about them. Kind of like how they've worked it into Lucy's deck, where you want to play that card anyway, because it lets you play Cav and get leader effect. But the fact that it has the stage removal as well just means that it's in your deck naturally. And then if a matchup like Emu, where you really need to get rid of it, comes up, well, you can. I think that's pretty cool. Next up, Table Games TCG said that they want removal to be usable. Once OP15 EVO4 come out especially, there seems to be no reason to run removal at all. You either can't, or you get brutally punished for doing so. They don't want black removal to reign supreme, they just want there to be ways to interact with the opponent's board outside of combat, which seems to be getting harder to do. Even in combat, swinging your opponent's stuff seems a little pointless some of the times, with brutal on-KOs like Robin. So we're going to sort of separate this into two things. I want to talk about the removal thing, and then I want to talk about on-KOs, because I think there's actually some interesting points here. With the removal thing, I actually kind of disagree that it's not going to be usable. I think removal as a core strategy, like we saw with Lucci and Sakazuki in the past, yeah, that's not viable anymore. Since Emu came out, that has not been viable. And with the rotations and all the new anti-removal stuff that's coming out, yeah, you're not going to be able to run a removal deck like Sakazuki. I think Bandai are very clear that they don't want that to exist anymore, which I think is fine. Those decks were very good for a long time, and they were pretty obnoxious to play into. However, I think on-curve removal is, it's still really strong, right? Especially in blue, because it dodges on-KOs, which we'll come on to in a minute. But like Jozu, Raging Tiger, they're both still really good cards. Sanji, Blue-Purple Sanji, isn't a removal deck, but it plays a bit like one, right? With access to Red Rock and Raging Tiger. And I know Red Rock's rotating, don't get me wrong, but you're still going to have Raging Tiger there, which is an incredible card. And you also do still see other cards. Red Blue VV is, again, not a removal deck, but it's a deck that plays a lot of removal. You play Ben Beckman, you play 8-cost Jinbei, 10-cost Shanks. So I think removal pieces in decks are still useful. But it's absolutely true that a full removal deck like Sakazuki, it's certainly after rotation, it's not going to be the play anymore. And I think that's fine. Moving on to the on-KOs, I do agree actually with this one. I think on-KOs are getting a bit crazy. Kikunojo being heal was really good for so long. And now that one just feels kind of, I can eat the heal. That's fine, I can eat the heal. But Robin absolutely is a brutal on-KO. For me, the one that is the worst is the 5-cost Nami. I really do hate that on-KO. The fact that her on-KO just lets you play another guy and get their effect, and then they're still there, so you don't lose any tempo. And in fact, a lot of the time, it's beneficial that they remove the Nami, because you get to play another Nami and get a burn. You get to play a Borsellino and get a heal now. There's so many good targets for that effect. I think that effect is so generic. And maybe by the time this video comes out, Nami's going to already be banned, but we'll see. I'm prepping this one quite far in advance. I'm having to, because I'm going to Japan for 3 weeks. Might be there when this is uploaded, who knows. But yeah, I've had to prep like a month's worth of videos in advance, which has been a new thing for me, actually. Off topic, of course, but I've always been sort of maybe a couple days in the future in terms of my uploads. But quite often it's just day off. But having to prep like a month's worth of videos in advance has been an interesting challenge. It's been strange. Anyway, back to table games. Yeah, I think they wanted to kill removal decks, but removal on curve, I actually disagree. I think it's as strong as ever, potentially. And but I agree with the on-KO. Some of them are getting a little crazy. For me, Nami's the worst, just because it keeps up too much board tempo and gets you advantage a lot of the time. Because the trade-off with on-KOs is that you get really good effects, like a heal or a life burn, but then that guy's gone. Like, that guy is gone. He's not coming back. But with Nami, you get another stupid on-play, and you just get another guy. The guy doesn't go. So for me, that one's the worst. One thing I posited to one of my homies, I think, a little while back is, what if Banish bypassed on-KOs? Because obviously Banish, when you attack into leader, is really good. But it can often feel like they'll just take the other hits and then counter the Banish, or I know the Banish isn't getting as much value, but if you made Banish bypass on KOs, that could be kind of cool. I know there's not a lot of Banish in the game anyway, but I think that would be an interesting effect anyway. Next up, we had this take from Slate6472. Don that gives 1k on your opponent's turn instead of 1k on your own. Don X1 abilities would still work. Summoning still works. Your Don is just defensive instead of offensive. No. No. Well, what's to stop me playing my guys and then towards the end of the game, once I've got my board, just putting 15 Don on my leader, or 10 Don on my leader and saying, yeah, I'm 15k leader. I think this is a bad idea. Certainly if you could have 10 of them. But I actually do think Slate is onto something here. I think Don that had different effects would be cool. The Red Bull Double Don tournament was really interesting to me. It didn't seem to like change too much from Constructed. A little bit here and there, people hitting a bit harder. But in general, it just kind of seemed like Constructed with a little bit of extra juice. However, I think if you could build your Don deck, and maybe you'd have to limit each Don to one-offs, and you had like a double Don in there, maybe you had one of these defensive Dons. I don't know, you could have a few different effects on them. And I'm not saying those effects necessarily would be the best ones, maybe they'd be too broken, but I do think Don with different effects could actually be something they look into in the future. I doubt we'll get this anytime soon, but potentially that Red Bull Double Don tournament is sort of hinting in that direction that they're at least interested in exploring it. Because I do think the Don system is really fun. The fact that you can use your resources as extra juice is one of the most interesting things about the game, honestly, that separates it from a lot of other games. At least to me, who's not actually played that many other games. But it sort of mixes up how you can do your turn a lot of the time. Because I played Lorcana back in Azurite Sea, that's it. I don't know, was that set 6? I think so. And when I had 8 ink and I didn't have anything to play, I had like a 4 cost. I just had 4 Don left over. And there was nothing I could do with it, really. There were some on-board effects, but in general, if you just wasted your Don in that game, it felt like. So I think the fact that you can attach it's really cool, and different effects would be very interesting, but I think potentially hard to balance. Next up, we had this take from Nightingale TCG, friend of the channel. And I've seen other people have opinions like this in the past. Something that Ben would like is a new alternate win condition. He was always hoping that Emu would be an Exodia type deck, and Nami was a cool one, but she got overtuned in the end, or there weren't enough cards to harm her playstyle. So an alternate win con that could be teched against if necessary. I have mixed opinions on alternate win cons. I think Nami, whilst honestly, most of the Nami players I played against were like really chill. They were chill people. That deck was not particularly engaging to play into. Once you sort of got decent at the game, you worked out, okay, I just play my guys and then I swing good numbers. And then sometimes you change up your numbers based on how many Don they used. I don't think it was particularly engaging. I think, personally, for me, I actually didn't like the design. I thought the design was pretty bad. But I think different alternate win cons that aren't just a completely different game would be more interesting. Like when Nami was, I think, originally theorized as like a battle mill deck, I think that was cool. I actually do think that was cool. Like OG Nami with like the Zeph and the Usopp. I think those were cool. But what she turned into with just, I'm going to sit there and not do anything and play counter events. It was so cringe to play into. But yeah, I think an Exodia type deck would be kind of cool, where you've got to, say you had to accumulate 5 different things on the board. Emu with the Elders, or like Robin having to accumulate the 4 road polyglyphs. I don't know. It could be kind of interesting. You'd have to make those cards have obviously weird conditions to find them or play them, because otherwise just not drawing one of your polyglyphs and losing would be kind of sad. But yeah, I think that could be kind of cool. And there's enough effect in the game already based on removal or resting to sort of disrupt that game plan. And maybe if you were trying to accumulate things, like gather the MacGuffins, maybe your leader effect, when you dealt damage, you would look at the top 5, 10 cards of your deck and just grab one. So you'd still have a reason to be focused on battling to get that extra digs, and your opponent would still have to focus on countering your swings. Or when you dealt damage, you would get to search your deck for one of your things and then bring it out. I don't know, something like that. I do think an alternate win con would be cool. You've got to be careful with them, right? Because, I mean, the formats where Nami has been close to best deck in the game. It's been a little bit scary. And once she finally did get there in Japan, they just had to ban it immediately. But yeah, I think a new alt win can be cool, but I think they've got to be careful with it. So something board-based rather than just, oh, my deck's gone. I think would be cooler, because there's far fewer ways to interact with the opponent's deck than their board. So if they had to accumulate something on board like an Exodia, I think that'd be kind of cool. And that sort of ties into this other idea, which I kind of stole a little bit from for that last response. A new card type of items. There are so many iconic things in the One Piece world, and this is from Canra Zero, that can't be represented on cards. Transponder snails, log poses, bounty posters, and so on and so on. Their design of this mechanic is your leader can hold 2 items. This sounds kind of like the tools system in Pokemon. Or gear. Is it gear in Riftbound? That's just come out. I've stopped playing that game due to availability issues, but yeah, your leader could be able to hold 2 items, and if you attack the leader over a certain amount, you drop one of your items. Then the value could be printed on the item. So stronger items would drop more easily, whereas weaker or utility items could be semi-permanent. I think this would encourage really interesting decisions on how much to swing and counter. You could even counter 1k to save your item but not your life. And then at the end, they put a Zoro leader whose thing is collecting 3 swords, and a Robin who collects poneglyphs. As we're exactly where I stole the Robin comment for Ben's response on the last screenshot. So shout out Canra Zero for giving me the tip off. But yeah, I think items could be kind of cool. I'm not sure quite how they'd interact with the current game, but I think you could definitely make something like this work. I'm not sure if they'd want to only go with your leader or let your characters hold items as well. And one thing that will be an interesting trade-off, right, is you get these effects, but they are cards out of hand. Unless, obviously, you have an item that says draw a card, but, you know. They've been doing that a lot with stages recently. But yeah, the trade-off of losing a card in hand to get some onboard effect, especially if your opponent can remove it by battle, I think that would be pretty cool, actually. You could have all sorts of effects as well, I'm sure. Like, you can have ones that just increase power. It's a 2-don card, and it increases your leader's power by 1,000 when attacking. Obviously, you probably wouldn't have a 2-don that increases it on both offense and defense semi-permanently. But, like, when attacking, and maybe you could even have, again, going back to, like, temporary items, like we were talking about with the stages, where the item just wears off after 3 battles or 5 battles. You could have a shield that, once your opponent's attacked you 4 times, the shield breaks. I don't know. I think the sort of things like transponder snails and log poses makes me think a lot of Pokemon's search items, like Ultra Balls and Nest Balls, which are sort of decks. They let you search your deck for a certain type of card. And I think we kind of already have that in the events. So I'm not sure whether all items would work, but I think it's an interesting idea. I could see certainly things that could be used as weapons, like swords, guns, Sea Prism Stone. It could certainly work, adding them to your leader. That'd be kind of interesting. I don't have too many more unique thoughts to add. We've already talked about like the stages that kind of was the same, sort of along the same lines. But yeah, I think more unique card types could be interesting if they do sort of start running out of ideas for unique sort of deck concepts. Next up, Straw Hat Treasure Hunter said that they want to see a set themed around Wano. We got that in OP01. We also got Kinemon in 02, right? So early days, we got a lot of Wano, but the card design and aesthetic didn't really give that arc the treatment it deserved, based on what Bandai is producing today. And yeah, I agree. We've had bits of Wano since, of course. We've had Yamato in OP06. We had RG Odin in EB01. But there hasn't been a Wano leader for a while, has there? And we're even losing the Kaido and Big Mom leaders to rotation. So I think, obviously we know OP15 is Sky Island. OP16 is going to be Marineford themed, which I'm quite hyped for. But maybe OP17 could be Wano. You could have a new Kaido leader, a new Big Mom leader, some kind of new like Wano country leader, be it Kinemon, Odin, Yamato, whatever. One of those guys would be pretty cool. And yeah, like the Japanese aesthetic is very beautiful, right? I mean, we're all card game players, we're all kind of nerds. It's going to be no surprise that I enjoy the Japanese aesthetic as much as many of you do. But yeah, I think it's really pretty. Cards like the 2-cost Hiyori, which I'll try and remember to add here. The alt art of that with all the sakura petals is just beautiful. I regret selling my one of these. I pulled this card and sold it because the price was high, but it's such a pretty card. It's so pretty. And Wano is up there with one of my favourite arcs. I've just finished it. I'm into Egghead now. But Wano was excellent. The character writing was so much better, I thought. And like, yeah, it had some fluff. Absolutely had some fluff. During like the prison bit, it was a bit slow. And a couple of other times as well. But once you sort of kicked into the raid, it was so hype. And the initial world building with all like the Wano natives, you know, meeting like Okiku and Otama and all the other samurai. It was really cool. It was one of my favorite arcs, for sure. And I do hope we get another set themed around Wano, because it's one of the it's the longest arc, right? And it is not very well represented post rotation. Next up, Space Taco 2792 says they need to fix the thing where the best counter to a color is the same color. And yeah, this is a classic. I've been complaining about this for quite a while. One of the first sort of examples of this I can remember being really prominent was the 5-cost black Sabo, excuse me, from OPO4 being the best counter to black removal decks, right? I mean, it's why BY, one of the reasons BY was so good was that card just kind of countered Lucci. So as Lucci was one of the best decks, BY's Sabo spam was very difficult to deal with as Lucci. And since then you've had, yeah, Pudding's a really good answer to blue. Banish for all of the game's lifetime was exclusive to yellow, and yellow's the trigger color, so Banish was good into yellow, but it was in yellow. And I'm sure there's other examples, you can list them in the comments, but yeah, they do seem to like doing this thing where the counter to this color is the same color. I think giving more colors effects like Pudding to punish blue, and they've been doing it with anti-removal to punish black, and they've absolutely been doing that, so credit where it's due. I think they are making an effort on this, but it's definitely a point I still agree on. And I think more life burn effects is something they should push into other colors as well. Even if it's just slapping Banish on some random characters, like the 5-cost Smoker. That card's sick. That card just having Banish is so sick. I really like it. It might not be the best card, but it's fun. It's fun having a green Banish option. And maybe if we had some better ones in, I don't know, like red or blue, that could be pretty cool into the yellow decks, which are taking over a bit at the minute. So yeah, I agree with you, Space Tarka. That'd be pretty cool. Now, I'm going to jump in with another one that I thought more people would mention, but I haven't actually, at the time of recording, seen anyone mention this, unless I missed it. Promos. If we're going to simultaneous release, they got to fix promos, man. They got to fix promos. One of the homies at my locals, Rosinante enjoy. He loves Rosinante. It's one of his favourite character. And he wanted to build a deck. It came out in OP12. Completely unplayable. Because we didn't get the fucking promo that they released alongside OP12 in Japan. And we didn't get that. 2 sets. 2 sets. Rosinante did nothing. Like, he wasn't great with the promo. But holy shit. He was awful without it. And now Rosinante's had a massive glark, right? Rosinante's doing great. My homie's thrilled. He's enjoying playing with Rosinante, but they've got to fix the promo distribution. The easiest way is to just insert them with league packs. Get rid of these crappy competitor packs that we get at locals. Just swap out the participation cards. Keep the winner cards if you like. I like having something for winning. I think the current winner cards actually look really awful. I don't like the massive winner text. I'd prefer just full arts like you get with the regional promos. But yeah, just take out the participation ones and add in these promos, whatever promos you're releasing alongside each set, like the lore promo, like the yellow 4-cost 2k lore. What else? Girl was another one, right? We waited on Girl for ages. There's still a Kaido from back in the day that's rotating. We still don't have it in the West. They need to fix promo distribution if they want to keep us on par with the East. Because that is one of the last things that is really poor in this game, in my opinion. Bandai are doing great work. The game feels really fun. You get the odd meta that's a bit stinky, but the game feels really fun. The art is incredible. The card stock is brilliant. The print quality, for the most part, is one of the best on the market. Sets feel sort of unique. I like the theming of the decks. The effects of the cards really do feel like they represent the characters. I think Bandai are doing an amazing job with this game. But promo distribution, man, so bad. So bad in the West. Just, I don't know exactly how they'd want to do it, but I think 3 LGSs would be the best way for me. Because we don't have all the same sort of magazines and infrastructure that they have in Japan for this type of thing. And finally, we have this take from Crocodile, who's become a bit of a mainstay of these types of videos. Always has very interesting opinions. More character variety, and not only for leaders. And he brings up the example of Purple Katakuri, who already had the 3-cost pudding, and then one of the SRs they printed for the deck was 1-cost pudding. And then in PLBO2, we got the 7-cost pudding. I think the EBO3 pudding is kind of bad, I'm not going to lie. It's just a 2k blocker, but it is still pudding at the end of the day. I think the fact that the deck plays, I mean, for example, no crackers, right? There's no crackers in the Katakuri deck. Where Cracker was one of the highest ranking officers in the Big Mom Pirates, right? He wasn't like any of the big boys, but he was very relevant in the show. He fought Luffy for ages. And he was sort of a big hurdle that Luffy had to overcome in the Big Mom Pirates. I don't think there's any Smoothies in the deck either, and Smoothie was less relevant in the show. But she was still, again, a high-ranking Big Mom Pirates. And I know the EBO3 Smoothie is pretty good in pudding. But yeah, I think it would be nice to see slightly less focus on sort of the same fan favourites. You get a lot of Luffys. Every set's got to have about 15 Luffys. And even within the Straw Hats, like, other than the Pirate Docking, which is cool, don't get me wrong, I like the Pirate Docking. There's so few Frankie cards that feel like they do anything. He has so many, like, vanillas and 2Ks. And he's a cool guy. Frankie's sick. I'm a big Frankie enjoyer, as you can tell. But yeah, I kind of agree. I think this is much more exacerbated with older leaders that then get later support. Because within one set, they do tend to only print like one of each character in the support in the set. And Kobe's a decent example of this. When Kobe came out in OP11, your Kobe was the secret Kobe. You played the secret Kobe. It was good in the deck. But that was your Kobe. Now we have the 4-cost Kobe that we got in PLBO2. And we got the 6-cost Kobe that we got in EBO4 or EBO4, OP15, that one. But yeah, one of those could have easily been like an X-Drake, right? There's no X-Drakes in the Kobe deck. There's a vanilla one, and it's shit, but I think that's another example. We've got like 2 Hibaris, 2 Kajakus, no X-Drakes. He's pretty prominent in Sword, right? Is he the boss? Is that right? I don't know. Maybe spoilers. Maybe. But yeah, X-Drake's prominent in Sword. That's not a spoiler. But there's like no X-Drakes in the Kobe deck. So I don't think they do too bad a job of it. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, you look at like UP Luffy or Ace. There's not floods of the same characters. But certain characters are definitely overlooked. And I think when decks get support later on, that's when it really sort of devolves into, oh, we'll just print another pudding for Katakuri. We'll print another Kobe for Kobe. Either way, let me know in the comments what you're hoping for from the next season of One Piece. I think we're at a really interesting crossroads of the game. Out with the old, in with the new. We've got rotation. We've got a new ban list, which you'll already know by the time you're watching this. And we've got simultaneous release. They're all sure to bring their own new interesting things and challenges. But I think it's a good time to be a One Piece card game player. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.